Hey, how's everybody doing today, guys? It's Luke here with New Age Thought, and today's video is going to be about the all of the election results that just occurred on November 2nd in the United States, and kind of the state of the Biden-Harris administration and where things are going to go from here. This was a very interesting election because a lot of Democrats lost. And that's not to say that some still won. The news is actually covering this, saying that a lot of Democrats lost, which a lot did, but it's not like all they won, or it's not like Republicans won everything, right? So it's almost like the media is trying to convince people like, hey, Democrats have lost. Like, don't worry, you're electing the people you want to elect if you are voting for somebody who is non-Democrat. And honestly, let me say this: it is members of the Democratic Party who are being elected, but at this point in the game of global political struggle and globalist kind of takeover of the world, it's really not a Democrat-Republican thing. Yes, more globalists and more kind of corporate-backed people tend to be functioning through the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party has definitely become a vehicle for those individuals and for that ideology and those policies. But it's not, I want people to understand, it's not so clear cut where when I say, oh, the Democrats versus the Republicans, I'm just flat out condemning all Democrats and thinking of the Republican Party as like holy or something. That I want to stress that's not the case, okay? So that being said, let's get into kind of what I want to talk about today. So overall, I think people are starting to wake up to how things are really going to play out with this Biden-Harris presidency, if that's even what you want to call it, because I still to this day have my personal doubts about the results of that election. And the reason I have that opinion is because of the mail-in voting and a lot of the things that took place specifically that year, which for anybody who studies elections will tell you was unique. It was, mail-in voting numbers that were very large and came all at once at late in the night or several days after the election should normally be tallied. As you'll remember, obviously COVID happened a couple months before the election, and that is a perfect way to disrupt the normal way of doing things in a number of circumstances. But when it comes to the election in particular, if you have a virus that is a legitimate reason to why people need to mail in their ballots, you can get away with a lot of fake ballots, and you can generate a lot of polls and votes that simply aren't there. And essentially the goal is to cause chaos and distraction in order to illegally put somebody in office or in power. And while the population is dealing with this other crisis, they are less likely to be observant and keen to the things that are going on that normally wouldn't go on. We do this as the United States. The CIA and intelligence agencies do this all the time in foreign countries. We've tried to do it in Cuba or Venezuela. We go, or even Russia way back, but we go around the world and we might not release a virus, but we'll do some sort of disruption, whether it's through special forces or, turning off the power, or, using some sort of EMP to kind of make some sort of distraction where we can then sort of do some things that normally wouldn't happen. Maybe insert somebody into power, or simply just assassinate somebody or, do things that are suspicious. So, let me say one more thing. I want everybody who watches this video to know that I will always respect the results of a democratic, fair, and free election as close as you can get to that, without enormous or direct tampering of the vote numbers. I will accept whoever the president is, even if it's somebody I dislike, because that's part of living in a democracy, and you have to be willing to do that. Now, the reason I'm saying this to you is because I don't believe that the election that happened in 2020, the presidential election, was free and fair. I really know for a fact that there was tampering, or at least there was. Without saying that there was tampering, you can at least say that there were unprecedented miscalculations and delayed income, or the delayed streaming of votes to be recorded. So let's move on for that. Two major kind of gubernatorial and mayoral elections that I want to talk about that are kind of being highlighted by the media in the country is the election of Phil Murphy, so the governor of New Jersey, who is a Democrat, and Michelle Wu, who just got elected as mayor in Boston. So let's start with Phil Murphy. I have to look at my notes because I don't even want to remember his name. So this guy has been in office before, and he was running against the GOP candidate. And I believe, what did I write on my notes here? Opponent was up with almost 40% of the vote. So there was a moment where the GOP candidate had almost 40%, a little bit less, of the vote coming in. That would mean that for Phil Murphy to win, he would need to win 2/3 of the remaining vote. So this is what I mean by when you study elections, you'll see that when a candidate has to, even if the night isn't over, if so many votes have come in and the other candidate has to win such a large percentage in a certain amount of time, it's very rare that that happens. And we know that because we can look at past elections and look at the rate at which votes come in, the rate at which we know a state has been won. And only until recently, only since the 2020 election, have we had this issue of, the mail-in ballots take long to get in. Notice that they don't come in the beginning of the night. The mail-in ballots always come toward the end of the night. Why is that? Well, it's because sometimes they don't know how many votes they will need to win. So I'm not saying that there aren't real mail-in ballots. There are. But when you have a mail-in ballot system, it opens the door for people who are not voting as themselves, agents, operatives, whoever you want to call them, people to falsify mail-in ballots, right? Because all you need to do is put some sort of identification information, and it really is very basic. You can send in, it's all electronic. Some are physically mailed, but a lot of it is usually done electronically, the registration part at least when it's filed in the system. My point is, it can be so easily manipulated, okay? So this guy, Phil Murphy, ended up winning in the last second, just like how Biden and Kamala won, right? They were losing for the first couple days, and then all of a sudden, over the next 2 days, you get this trickle in of mail-in votes that all of a sudden they win these states that, had definitely gone to Trump. It was like this weird thing where they were kind of waiting to see how many votes they needed, and it took some time. So you'll know when people do these things, they can't hide it completely. And that's the beauty of it. You can see that something went on. You can't necessarily prove it because they're not stupid. If you could prove it so easily that they were falsifying ballots, then they wouldn't do it, or it wouldn't be effective, right? It's only effective if it looks real. All right, so that's what people need to remember too. So that's kind of the thing with Phil Murphy. Now let me move on to Michelle Wu. Michelle Wu just got elected as the mayor of Boston. Okay, she is a Democrat. She was running against George, who is, I believe, I don't know if she's a fellow Democrat or a Republican. I would assume she's a Republican, but I'll have to look into it. I know her policies definitely fall in line more with Republican policies, but that's not the point. The point is Michelle Wu, from the start, I don't know, I live in Boston, so I can attest to this, and this part of the video is really more for Bostonians, but it applies to what's happening in the rest of the United States too, and I can tell you about it on a personal level, not just from the media. Every ad locally was for Michelle Wu. I mean, there were other ads for other mayoral candidates, but Michelle Wu had all the money, she had all the funding, she had the protection of the media on her side, and granted, that's how you win elections, but let me ask you something. Now, Boston isn't a, well, it depends who you ask, but there's a lot of liberal people who live here in Boston. There's a lot of college students, there's a lot of people who go to Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, BU. There's and those universities, most universities tend to, be more toward the left, and they kind of, these students come out of college and the majority of them are, if they didn't already come in with those views, are leaving with more liberal, more socialist type of views, kind of almost anti-American, anti-male, pro, minority, pro-queer rights and everything like that. And there's nothing wrong with being for minorities and the rights of queer people. It's just that it's being taught in schools almost as like part of the curriculum, which I think is something that, unless you're taking an ethics or a social class, you shouldn't really be learning about, but it's kind of found its way into almost every class. So her parents, Michelle Wu's parents, immigrated from Taiwan, which is right next to China. For those of you who don't know, Taiwan is actually independent, claims to be independent from China. China doesn't view it that way. China views Taiwan as their sovereign territory, and a lot of countries also view it that way. So you have the United States, who has been in support of Taiwan up until recently. I wonder why. And then you have other countries, like let's say China and I don't know, there's probably North Korea, who are definitely in favor of conquering Taiwan, and that is at risk of happening pretty soon. But that's a separate issue. So her parents migrated from Taiwan. Now, if you wanted, as the Chinese government, right? If you wanted to send an operative to America, well, you would probably send them to Taiwan first, because Taiwan is a more democratic part, little individual kind of mini nation, and we have a lot more, ports, and you can fly into Taiwan. Like, if you're coming to the United States or to a Western country, Taiwan is kind of that little bastion of, democracy, as much as they have over there, being right next to China. So China has kind of the same way they're doing to that they kind of have done to us and other countries around the world. They are subvertly kind of infiltrating Taiwan with lots of spies, lots of different surveillance equipment. So they kind of like tear away at its internal democracy from right underneath them. And that's why you saw all of those riots happening. Vice did a documentary about this Taiwanese man who was working like 18 hours a week just to get a mask. Anyway, I am going off too much about Taiwan, forgive me. But it's important for you to understand that if you're the Chinese government and you want to infiltrate America, you would send people through Taiwan first. But that doesn't mean that her parents are agents. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that they came from Taiwan, and while Michelle Wu was born in Chicago, okay, as she got older, her parents got divorced. And we don't really know too much about Michelle Wu's parents. And that could very well be on purpose. And I don't I can't sit here and prove to you that Michelle Wu's parents have any connections to the Chinese Communist government, and I can't sit here and prove to you that Michelle Wu has any ties to the Communist Chinese Party. But she is Chinese. Her first language was Mandarin, okay? And she met Elizabeth Warren at Harvard as her professor. Elizabeth Warren brought her kind of under her wing. Elizabeth Warren, we know, is totally for this globalist, she's talked like she is in love with China. She thinks that, we ought to just kind of copy them. And I'm not talking about technology, I'm talking about off a government structure. I mean, she's, kind of close to Bernie in terms of her policies, very socialist. She wants to see the elimination of firearms. So Michelle Wu just got elected. But really, I mean, it's hard to see a Chinese woman getting elected as the mayor in an American major city the year after a major virus comes from China. And even, it's not Michelle Wu's fault that the virus came, or Chinese people's fault that the virus came from China, but politically, that doesn't play very well. So it's a little strange. Obviously, Boston is a very accepting city. We're not going to judge somebody just because of their race, but there are a lot of factors that play into Michelle Wu's election that make me ask a lot of questions as to what's really going on there. She has stated that she wants to defund the Boston Police Department. Now, this is a policy that I just can't get behind, no matter where you are in the United States. I do not understand this insane policy of defunding the very organization that keeps all of us safe. I mean, that's it. I mean, I think we can all agree that there are examples of when police or domestic security forces use too much force. That always happens, but that's the human condition, okay? We have to have people in our society who have force, who have the ability to stop bad people who are using force, right? And sometimes that can go overboard, but for the most part, it doesn't. And the idea of defunding these people, the police, the people who keep us safe, the people who wake up every day and put their life on the line so that me and you can watch Netflix and smoke weed or do whatever the hell we want to do. And then we, I don't, but other people sit around and, do whatever they want and go, yeah, fuck the police. Like I see like college students, like white college students, and all, it doesn't matter if you're white or not, but they're saying like, yeah, fuck the police, as if they have something against them. I'm like, if something bad happened to you, I guarantee the police would be the first person you would call. Like if some guy wasn't around, or, you couldn't defend yourself, or somebody used a knife or a gun against you, I guarantee you're calling the police. That's how it goes. And you want them to have less equipment to do their job, so that when you call them, instead of them being able to come and shoot the bad guy who's robbing the bank and or raping a woman and or stealing money, mugging you, the criminal doesn't give a fuck about the laws, okay? You want to make the guy who's fighting on the side of good have less equipment. I think that just speaks for itself. And I think that policy shows you exactly what it's trying to achieve, which is it's a policy among others that Michelle Wu and other Democrats have, which is to weaken the United States, to weaken our ability to protect ourselves, to take away our guns. We have our guns not just for self-defense, but to protect against tyranny, okay? That's why we have them, okay? A lot of people today say, oh, well, what are you really going to do with your gun? How are you going to stop a government that is using bigger weapons or something like that? It's not so much about that. First off, a lot of those soldiers, I doubt, would ever open fire on their fellow Americans, because that's what America, we love each other. We have that sense of community here, especially the people who choose to be soldiers. But what the Second Amendment is more about is if you are creating policies, like look at Australia right now, right? Like they are in total COVID lockdown, okay? People are getting tackled in the parks for not wearing their mask or walking too far from their house. I mean, it is literally like a regime. And it's kind of insane how we're here in America and COVID is still going on. It's no like worse over there than it is over here. But for some reason in Australia, they have no, like people are getting arrested. Like it's so much more tyrannical over there. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's because it's in somewhat close proximity to China. And their effect and their ideologies have kind of seeped into Australia, and they don't have any guns. So when the government makes a decision like that, the people aren't making that decision. They may have elected somebody, but once they're elected, they're making that decision, and cops are arresting you from walking too far from your house. If everybody owns a gun, politicians are a lot less likely to start making those policy decisions, because they go, hold on, like we can't just do this. Like people have guns, like it just makes you kind of think twice. And that's not a threat of violence. That's simply to say, like, if you're gonna do something that is against what the people actually want, if people have firearms, they have the power to kind of combat that more. Taking that right away removes one more obstacle in achieving the goal of complete tyranny and control over a population. You can't control a population if that population has guns. It's a lot harder, okay? So Michelle Wu wants to take away firearms. Granted, sometimes it's a little different in the city, but it's still America, and this is Boston, and you have the right to carry a firearm if you have a good reason for it. And she wants to defund the police. I mean, those policies alone are detrimental to this country. And they're the same type of stuff that we are seeing with the Biden administration on a larger scale. All of these, whether it's Phil Murphy or Michelle Wu or Biden or somebody else, if they have these policies that are just don't make any sense, if they're winning by mail-in votes in the last quarter of the election, when the final hours, they somehow manage to skimp out a win. That is scary. That is a sign that there's a larger plan in place, and that people are not trying, the people who are looking for this more global, universal world are not trying to hide themselves anymore. The globalists and the Democrats who have been kind of co-opted by them, they're not trying to hide their hand anymore. They are in full attack mode. They are coming after your rights. They're coming after your guns. They're coming after your basic individual freedoms, being an American. And it's all designed to see if you will give them up, to see if they can actually achieve their goals. Obviously, they're going to brainwash lots of people with the media, and there's going to be people screaming, oh yeah, we don't want any rights, and we don't want any guns, and we don't want, just you take care of us, government, you tell me what to do, I submit to you. There's going to be people like that. But America still has so many true American citizens, and they're not going to give up. So by prodding and prodding and prodding with these policies, it might not be achieved today, it might not be tomorrow. They don't care if it takes 10 years, 25 years, or 50 years, as long as eventually America as we know it is out of the way. Who is they? Globalists, people in big tech, okay, certain world leaders, families that have run things for many, many generations, like the Queen of England, her family. You have J.P. Morgan, the Morgans, the Rockefellers. People have heard of these names before, not because they're part of conspiracy theories, but because they are wealthy and they have influence and power. That's why there's a Rockefeller Center in the middle of New York City, because he has enough money to pay for that, okay? And these are the same people who have so many resources that they want to see America fall, because they know that the next kind of step for them is to have a more global world, a world where we don't have nation states, or if we do have nation states, they're all kind of ruled over by some group, whether they're in Brussels like the EU or who knows where, and they don't care about hiding their hand. So it's up to us to stand up and start coming together and having that spiritual connection. No matter what religion you're from, or even if you're an atheist, you can still engage in a feeling. And if we're ever going to become a civilization that goes off of planet Earth and starts to colonize space, our real destiny, being reunited with whoever is out there in the stars, our forefathers, that's our real destiny. And in order to get there, we have to grow spiritually. So with that, I'm going to end it there. New Age thought, Luke here. Whether we like it or not, we're in the thick of it.